Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is a Aspen based scene that I just stamped out. And I have stamped this out over the course of a couple days and nights, okay? I didn't, do it 8 hours a day or anything like that, but there's a lot of layers involved in the creation of this scene. I wanted to, in thinking back to some memories of walking through a grove of trees or aspens or something like that, one thing that I always was struck by was this notion of kind of walking through kind of backlit fall color trees. It feels to me like walking through a living kind of a stained glass. That's what it looked like to me. It's like the stained glass of nature, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create that kind of shimmer, or go after that type of thing as much as I could in a two-dimensional stamped image. So there's a lot of layers in this, and I have a lot of different colors of gel pens, different values and different hue, different incarnations, in terms of metallics, just a wide range of colors within, a given hue and range. There's a light yellow and lemon yellow and pale orange and white here. But when you get a set of, a decent set in terms of the number of colors you have to work with, it opens up some possibilities as far as adding some different looks within your imagery. So when it comes to colored leaves and backlit and shimmering types of leaves, it's really fun to kind of take advantage of a large range of pens like these. And I should note that if you didn't watch my other videos, it's a very inexpensive set. This was $26 for 180 colors, so I'm not talking about a huge expense here by any means, but there's a lot of colors to choose from, and when we're talking about leaves kind of shimmering in the light, we're talking about a lot of different variations of hue and light within that given space or object. And gel pens being able to work light tones and semi-opaque tones over darker tones, it really opens up some kind of possibilities as far as getting an illusion of a little bit more three-dimension, okay? So when we're talking about an image like this, any type of stamped image, we're talking about something very flat and, two-dimensional. I mean, I try to create some variation within there, but, just kind of finishing it off with some different touches and little scumbling little marks and overstamping lighter shades and darker shades within a given object. It can look a little bit more, I don't know, I'd hate to say realistic, but realistic in terms of the depth that trees truly have and the variations of light and shadow that are reflected by, tens of thousands of leaves kind of playing their part in kind of creating a reflective and transparent surface if you have it backlit. So this is truly an experiment. This is not an instructional video by any means, but just it's one of those videos, as I explain later on in the video, that it's just about kind of hoping to discover some new techniques and maybe processes that you can implement in your future work, and I think I've discovered some things that can possibly work, you know, with trees, you know, using a given image. I did all kinds of things. I re-stamped some of these branches in here just in a very loose manner to create some extra shadows and depth. I've stamped some impressions on here with pigment ink, okay? That worked to a degree, but there are some things I discovered that you can't do too, unless you use like a spray fix, you know, like working some gel pen marks back into pigment ink. Applications just didn't work because the ballpoint is kind of rolling up into that wet, you know, thicker pigment ink sitting on the surface there. So spray fixing, adding marks, adding some tone, more gel pen, more impressions. So I don't know, this is a big, you know, experiment for me, but I like the end result. I think, you know, there is a decent amount of depth in here and surface texture. It's almost kind of impressionistic, you know, in some of these areas if you just kind of blew it up in terms of the amount of ink used on them in different colors and in different applications. So if you choose to watch this kind of long, drawn-out, kind of exploratory video, I hope you enjoy it. Or you can kind of skip, you know, every 10 minutes or so and, you know, kind of see where I am along the lines here. But for me, it's really about the variation in here, a lot of gel pen work. But for me, what really brings these the scene together is having kind of these white, nice stalks, trunks, and tree branches in here, because everything kind of got really kind of complex and textural, but just having something kind of more definitive in terms of these vertical white lines throughout the scene kind of give it a little bit of continuity and structure, and are appropriate with the subject matter of the Aspen. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comments section below. Okay, I really had some fun playing around on that matte cardstock, and I thought I would do it again in another video, kind of applying some things that I learned in the previous scene. But playing around with those gel pens, doing a lot of the light into dark applications of color, really pretty fun. It's a little bit of a different spirit than adding dye-based inks and working kind of in the opposite way, kind of more in a thin or a thick to thin light to dark application, working from in gel pens from a dark to light opaque kind of a process. It's quite a different spirit. I'm sure a lot of the same kind of basic principles apply. Just cleaning off some of my stylus tools here. This is the way you usually do it right here. You grab your tip right here and just kind of press down. You can also put these in the sink and just run some water into them. But like this one right here had blue in it, so I'll probably use some blue. This one right here had a lot of reddish tones, so if I was going to do like a pink or something like that, I would use it on this tip right here. Usually, when I keep to the same basic hue for the color, I don't really need to get these tips completely clean, because you don't need to, because most of the ink is removed, and then if you're working in that same color scheme, then it's really not going to matter. Okay, now I had a lot of fun with this scene right here, and I liked playing around with those lit tree trunks there. They were kind of white, and I thought I would kind of really kind of play on that type of color application, gel application with these aspens here. And that aspens have that nice kind of white bark. I'm going to do Let's see, I don't know if I have enough of my dye-based inks, but maybe. Maybe I'll work in some of these tones right here. Maybe not the orange, that's kind of moving into a different color scheme. It's more of that green, isn't it? Let's see what I can do here with these pens. Kind of having an aspen tree, kind of turning from the greens into yellows. I thought I would do it in a couple different sizes. Maybe like this one, and maybe some in the background or something like that. I don't know, I'll have to work out a composition. I'm not sure how the composition is going to be, but it'll be more about the kind of the tree and the technique than the composition, but we'll try to get a good composition at the same time. All right, now let's say that this is kind of your fall type of color scheme. So this grass textures, and the grass textures that I'll use in here, maybe I'll just kind of stick to more of a brown. Maybe I'll have a little bit of green in it. I don't know, just for a little bit of variation. This is the tree texture stamp. I mean, not the tree texture stamp, the grass texture stamp, sorry. Let's see, let's try some of the kind of more olivey green in it. And just kind of, I colored the whole thing with brown, and I'm just kind of going around in this and adding a little bit of touch of some green here and there. Well, it's one of the fun things about these brush markers, these 1500 series brush markers. There's a lot of ink in them. They're very juicy, and you can really do a lot of kind of blending on them. Okay, there's not a whole lot of green in there, but there's slight bit of variation. Okay, so you don't really have to do that, you know, with the additional tones, but it kind of, if you're going to do kind of these multi-toned kind of areas on your scene, adding it into the actual impression is just kind of giving you a little bit of a head start, and it, you know, in the end, it's kind of a little bit more about subtle variations and detail. That really kind of, I don't know, adds that kind of that special touch into a scene, okay? And it doesn't take that much longer to, you know, apply a little bit of extra variation to a print. Okay, now I just did the second impression with that. You know, after that one right there, I was, you know, this texture. I wouldn't want to go for 3 impressions because it's just too much. But anyways, what I'm doing is I'm building a foundation here of tone or texture. This is the sedge filler stamp. It's a little bit smaller. Let me see. Let me do this at a little bit of an angle. How's that? Now this, I'm used to working on glossy cardstock. So on this one right here, you know, in glossy cardstock, because the glossy is not quite as absorbent, I can probably go for 2 or 3 impressions of it. But I think for the sake of using matte paper, or for the fact that I'm using matte paper, I'm just going to go for 1 impression. If it's just, well, maybe I can go for more. So I'm kind of having to get used to working on matte. I don't work on it too often. It's rather rare, in fact. Maybe not lately, because I'm doing a lot more experimentation with my surfaces. Oops. I'm using, oh, I got a spot of water right there, and it's kind of rippling it a little bit. Well, no matter. Alright, let's see. Alright, this is where this gets a little tricky because there's so much variation here. I am going to just tone that whole thing with brown. Maybe I shouldn't do that, but we'll just see how this goes, okay? I do want these aspens to have that nice, kind of brilliant gold in some areas of the tree. I feel that if I do the whole thing just with that hue, I don't know, there wouldn't be enough contrast against the background. Although you could certainly do that. You can certainly try. Or you can just, it can really just be about, you know, the trees themselves. You can stamp them on white pieces of paper and not do a whole background sky or something like that, and that should be fine, you know. Okay. Let's see. I do happen to have a brilliant yellow, which is a little bit of a lighter yellow. Let me see, this is a lemon yellow. This is number 5 yellow, and this is brilliant yellow. This is the number 43. It's a little bit dry. So, I'm going to add, I do have re-inkers for this. Okay. Pausing the video, I'm going to go get my re-inker for this 43. I was just going to add a little bit of water in there, but since I do have the re-inker for this one, since 43 is an actual Mari matchable pad, it comes with an associated re-inker, so pausing video. Okay, my brilliant yellow, the number 43 re-inker fluid. You just kind of add it, and you can watch it kind of get sucked up in this by kind of capillary action. Or maybe this is more gravity. Okay, can you see that? You can see it kind of soaking down. This is dry down here, and this is wet up here. Okay. And we'll get this pretty juicy. Because I'm going to use a lot of ink for these trees. So I do want it fairly wet. Alright, now it's going to take a little bit of time for this to kind of absorb. This tip right here probably needs get a little bit of a head start, so I'm just adding some of this re-inker fluid directly to the tip here. And that'll just kind of connect up with that reservoir on the interior, and it should get this pen flowing pretty well. Alright, good as new, maybe, as far as the ink goes. It's better than, you know, refilling these pads. As long as your tip is in good shape, it's, you know, it's certainly better than tossing them out or something like that. If I didn't have the, you know, the brilliant yellow Marby re-inker and I had this pen, if I had like a yellow, I don't know, let's say Distress ink, you know, re-inker, I would probably re-ink this with this ink. Even it would be mixing brands and stuff, but I don't think that should be a problem. Okay. Alright, this isn't as juicy as I want, so let's go with a little bit more. This pen was a little bit dry, or quite dry. Alright, so this should be ready. That's pretty soaked, okay? Alright, now these are dye-based inks, which are water-based inks and watercolors. We call these watercolor pens. You know, when we were kids, you know, they call those sets watercolor pens, right? Get into crafting, they call them dye-based inks, right? Same thing. Water soluble. Alright, so I'm putting a pretty good slathering of this ink on there. What I'm doing is I'm kind of rolling off the ink that I'm kind of grabbing off of the stamp here. Okay, so I'm getting some mark here, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of rolling this like this. See, this is my technique. I'm kind of rolling this pen as I apply it like that. So I'm kind of lifting and applying at the same time. And hopefully this gives me a kind of a nice, kind of watercolory looking print. There's a lot of variation, of course, that would happen with this type of technique. But that's one of the fun things, getting that variation. Okay, rolling this off, does it pollute my tip? Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, that tip's not bad. It's no worse for the wear. Okay, and focus in here. Here we go. See that tip? I mean, it's slightly stained, but who cares, you know? It's not going to come off. It's, you know, it's pure, you know, 43 yellow right there again. You know, you can just kind of wipe it off right here. See that? That was at its dirtiest, but you just wipe it off a little bit and it's clean. But, you know, I mean, if you're super, super kind of anal about your pens, you know, then maybe not do that. Maybe work from light to dark, you know, if it makes you feel more comfortable. And that's perfectly understandable. Now, it works with these Marvy ones, you know, these 1500 series, because the tip is so juicy, you know. I mean, you can get that right off. Doing it like a fine point or something like that, I probably wouldn't do that on something like this. But, I don't know. I do tend to just kind of make use of whatever I happen to have. If it's a fine point, maybe use it on its side. You know, I'm using this on its side too. I'm not going tip down. That would kind of, you know, smash my tip a little bit. So you kind of use the sides of your tips here. Okay. All right. This was a number 5 yellow. That's just your basic Marvy yellow. All right. Now, I took a little bit of time to color this Aspen, but this is going to play such a prominent role in terms of the composition here, so I don't mind spending a lot of time with that. It is kind of it'll be the main element in this scene. All right. Now, while I am concerned about the impression of this, there's going to be a lot more gel pen work over the top of it, so it'll get built up, so I'm not terribly concerned with how this looks as is, okay? All right, so we have this foundation right here. A lot more, you can see that kind of watercolory type of look on there. All right, now let's see, do I want to go with the larger one or should I go with the smaller one? Let's go with the smaller one here. All right. I'll do this one kind of on the back side of that slope. Do the same type of application here. A little bit of brown, or a lot of brown. Maybe I'll mop off some of that brown here, just with a dry paper towel. And let's try some of these greens on here. This is really true experimentation. As far as everything on this channel, you know, it's a spontaneous kind of instructional channel, if it is instruction. I don't know. Half of these videos are instructional. A lot of them experimentational, you know, in terms of the content here. So, sorry about not being prepared, like having this pen inked up. Alright. I have a feeling this one's going to be a lot more yellow here than that one. If you watched that video on that, there's a stamp of the hand stamps of mine, and how I was talking about stamping that little piece of paper that fit underneath those old styles of mounts from them. This is the type of coloring that I did, that I spent a lot of time on at one point in time while working for them, transferring, I don't know, mechanizing the process, if that was mechanization, if you can call it that, for color laser copies, but just doing all this type of kind of blending of tone with the brush markers. Okay, now I'm kind of masking off this hillside right here, and I still want a pretty decent portion of this tree, so we'll go fairly high up, but I'll have the trunks there kind of masked off so it looks like they're on the back side of the hill, or the slope, or whatever. I'm probably stamping this longer than I really need to, because the page is going to be a lot more absorbent than matte paper. Okay, came out about the same tone. Oh, it's even darker. Well, it looked lighter on here for some reason, I don't know why. Okay, so we have those. And I have this little Aspen row stamp, these little ones. Let's do that. Okay, let me just do a couple taps with that brown, because they did come out quite dark. It's one of those things where sometimes you can't tell if you have color on your ink on your stamp or not. Some inks tend to kind of bead up a little bit. They all kind of stamp the same, but some kind of bead up on the surface of the rubber a little bit more. Those are the ones that it's kind of hard to tell sometimes if they're inked up sufficiently, adequately. Alright, so I have that. Now these ones should be, I'm guessing, lighter. I don't know. We'll see. Let me go ahead and use some of that number 5 on there as well. Okay, now, if these are lighter, then I don't need to mask off the darker ones, I don't think. I'm working on a different media, but see where this is going to go in the background here? So this is going to overlap it, and this is going to overlap that side. It looks like about one tree in, so I'm just taking off some of the ink off of those side trees a little bit, where there will be some overlapping of my existing impressions. Maybe I'll take a little bit of ink off the bottom of it too, so it kind of transitions down a little bit. But again, we'll do some masking here. About like so, and we'll try to get some trees in the background. Okay, that worked out pretty good. Like that. Okay. I think I'm going to do something. I'm going to throw a couple more impressions of this on each side, just to kind of frame it off and to make it look a little bit more full. Okay? I love using stamps, just different areas of a given design for different purposes, okay? So I'm just using this edge here of this same stamp. I like getting a lot of mileage out of my imagery. And what I mean by that is I'm using them for different purposes, okay? We have kind of a main image right there, but this is also using it for kind of subtle foreground, I guess, layering. Alright, so we'll come in about like here. So I'm using about that portion of it. I'm going to go a little bit darker on the tip here. I'll go a little bit more green. Because of what I'm looking at right here, I want this part darker than this area right here. So it looks like it's a little bit more, a little bit closer to us. I don't need to be too precise, but it's just because I have the gel pens that I can use, so I can darken and lighten something accordingly. But I don't want to have to do that if I don't, if I don't have to, if I can get it, with the impressions themselves, then there's just less work to have to do later. Okay, so you can see what I'm talking about right here. See this branch at the top of the tree is a little bit darker, so it stands up against this a little bit. See that right there? These should be more green, I know, the aspens, but I'll add that color in a come here. It's kind of building it up, from a little bit more of a kind of subtle tones in the background and, or darker tones in the background, and then building up the foliage. In theory. I don't know, we'll see how this goes. It's kind of taking what I did in the previous video and trying to kind of do a little bit more of an extreme version of that process and technique. Okay, so I'm kind of using this portion right here, making a nice kind of grove of these trees by putting it kind of closer to us and lower down on the composition. It gives the illusion of, proximity. Okay, like that. So building it up, I can even go right here. That might be kind of nice. Yes, I think so. All right. Let's do it in green. There's a little bit of brown on this stamp still, but darker green. So, and how about a little bit of lighter green? So it was like a number 72, a number 4, and a number 11, if anyone really needs to know exactly. Okay. Nice little grove building slowly. The composition. We're kind of setting the stage for something right in here, but we'll see. Okay, now let me see. We can do the sky, we can do the grass right now. If we want to, I'm not sure what I want to address right now. Maybe the sky. I think I'm going to keep the sky very, very basic in terms of a color. I don't know if I'll even go with a range of tone. I'm thinking blue, you know, just to kind of play against the, well, maybe I'll do something different. Maybe I'll go with a kind of more of a dusk type of color scheme. I'm not really sure. Okay, well, I'm thinking that, but let's do the grassy area here. Okay. Yeah, just grab whatever colors you have. Kind of in, if you're following along with this, I'm going to do something like greens, you know, a slight hint of green, some yellow, and some brown. Kind of more of the, you know, not quite so plush spring green in here. And these distressing should do nicely. Okay, what do I have here? This one's the mustard seed. Oh, you can kind of roughly start off with the lightest tone and work darker, okay? Using a very light touch, I'm barely touching the page, okay, and just lightly dragging this down. Okay, now here's my thing, my concept, or my goal with this. I want some variation within this grass. So what I'm looking at is where some of the trees are located. And just in general, I'm thinking I'll probably put a little bit of a heavier saturation of color, maybe at the base of some of these trees, kind of giving it the illusion of shadow, okay? But the biggest thing is having some variation, so it's just not all one mono value area, okay? Have some variation there, and that section and your overall scene will have a nice, rich surface with variation across it. It's not so monotonous, in other words, okay? Alright, see, it's kind of warming it up just with that mustard seed yellow. You can use just a basic yellow. I'm using this because it was right in front of me, not because it's, you know, some kind of planned out concept in terms of color. I'm working in light tones, okay? And I'm sticking with the general color scheme in this setting here, okay? Here's some peeled paint, okay? If you don't have that, you can use kind of a light yellow, any type of light green, light green, yellow green, whatever. If it's too kind of hot of a color that you have, then kind of mute it a little bit with some, I don't know, like this right here, a tea dye or some kind of, you know, brownish tone hue, like an antique linen, walnut stain, whatever. Any kind of tan that you might have, or a brown would look good. Thing is just kind of stick with some lighter tones in the beginning, I think. It just makes it easier to build up your values and to watch them change in front of you if you're not doing it in such a, you know, a spontaneous application, you know, like using like black on white, you know, and adding it down. It's, you know, it'll be kind of an instantaneous type of buildup of color, tone. I prefer it to be much more gradual. Okay, here's the peeled paint. Okay, a little bit of variation in here. I mean, I can go more. I can add more color for deeper shadows if I want to, but I don't really think I need to too much. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll just add this in, and I'll decide later if I want to add some more. But let's start looking at the sky. Okay. Not that blue wouldn't be bad, but I think I want to experiment a little bit on this. I'm thinking kind of a earthy brown, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not quite sunset, but I don't know, kind of approaching that golden hour. I don't want golds, though. I don't know. We'll see what I can come up with. Okay. All right, let's go back to this tea dye. I don't know if this is going to be juicy enough. All right. Let's see what I can do here. All right, I'm going to put a little bit of water in here to make it kind of more of a watercolor type of application here. All right. Okay, that works pretty good. Just put some water in your applicator and it's actually very nice. It streaks across here really quite well, okay? But, boy, there's a lot of water in that. It's kind of picking up some of the color from my impressions, which could be okay, but I don't want too much of that going on. It certainly gives a little bit of continuity, though, from land and sky. To have some of that color from the trees in that sky area, okay? Alright, just a few little swipes like that. Kind of watercolor-ish. Well, I guess it is, not ish, it is watercolors. It's really, there's a lot of there's a lot of water in this. It's kind of making my whole card bow right now. Alright, I want some variation in my sky, just like I want it down here. Okay. See if I can kind of go for the darker upper left and right corners for kind of a framing purpose. Maybe like that. Now this is not a very dark color. Okay, this is tea dye. So I'm getting all this kind of variation just with one color. It just depends on how diluted it was, which isn't hard to do, but there is, you know, definitely a degree of randomness. Even though I'm the one that's applying it, it's kind of getting it from, I don't know, it's not always apparent to me how much ink, water and ink is going to be coming off of this. I can control it a little bit with the with how much I'm kind of, how much pressure I'm applying on this tip, which isn't very much at all, but I'm not in complete control. But enough, though. Just go with a barely touch your page, and see I'm really going with applying this in repetition to get these marks. Okay, so we have that kind of streakier background like that. I think that's kind of nice. I mean, that's, you know, one color. I think that's sufficient there. I don't know, I could go for a slight variation. Let's do that, actually. Let's add a little bit of a hue variation. Okay, let me try this rosemary. Go with some really, that might be too bright here, for, you know, more than I'd want, so I tell you what, let me try it. Okay, this is really dry. Let me put a touch of, I'm just adding a little drop of water in here. Okay, and then I'm going to dip into this pad. I've diluted it so much, and I'm adding that ink to this, and all it is like water coming out of it. There's nothing. Let's see. This pad's had it too. It's really time to be replaced. Okay. All right. I'll give it a try here. Practice stroke. Okay. I can't see anything. Switching. It's that pad just super dry. Okay, that was rose pink. This is rosemary here. Oh, this is like a brand new pad. Okay. Alright. Reapplying technique. Water in sponge technique. Or re-instituting this. The water and sponge technique. Okay, that's what I want right there. I want it kind of really subtle. There we go. That looks really good. Okay. I'm a horrible watercolorist. I was never really good at soft medium, but that, you know, see that streak right there? It's just, it's a real diluted version of this, so up here in the sky, I think that just that little hint of pink is kind of nice. And sometimes what I do is I'll bring some of it down into my grass just for a little bit of continuity. Remember to retain your light areas. Okay, don't color it all out at this point in time. Okay, so we have a pretty good foundation of tone now. What I'm going to be doing is that technique of building this out now. I should do a before and after photograph of this. Scene before, pre-gel pen and post-gel pen work. Okay. Looking, observing, trying to figure it out. I'm thinking about some pens. I'll pop out some pens and we'll see what to do with this. But I think I am going to take a photo of this, so pausing the camera right now. Okay. I just took a photograph of this using this camera. Alright, I need some space with which to work, especially when I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so if this is like the first video that you've tuned in on the Stampscapes channel, these are some pens, a gigantic gel pen set, and this is the set that I'll be using to build up my colors with, and my variation in my trees. We have some greens, okay, and I'll really focus more on the yellows. So let's say I want some basic ones. I'm still really getting familiar with this set here, so let's go with this yellow here, and some brighter greens. A couple of these greens that I grabbed earlier were the glitter variety, and I didn't want so much that. And I'll, of course, grab the yellows. There's such beautiful variations in this set, you know. I mean, to think that I can go with a range of values that are just so subtle. This is like a really pale, like yellowy beige or something like that. But just that range, these three yellows right there, you know, it's amazing having that those colors to work with. All right, so something like this, I think, for the foliage. Okay. Something like this, and hopefully I can bring these trees to life. Now, boy, where to start? I have a feeling this is going to look pretty bizarre. But here it is. Okay, in the darker areas, I mean, the whole background of these trees are going to be pretty dark, so I'm going to start building up some tones. Okay, starting with a darker background. I'll add, you know, kind of my darkest of highlighting, and then within that field I'll start to build those out or up with progressively lighter tones. Okay, and hopefully we give we can add a lot of variation and dimension and kind of, I don't know, just general excitement to these trees. Okay. Alright. Zooming in, which is always my danger spot when doing these videos, because I need to remember to work in the field of view, which I'll try to remember to do. I get into my scenes sometimes and I just kind of forget to see where the camera's focusing. Alright, so see this green in here, I'm just kind of scumbling it around, right? It's almost like a stain in here. And it's not that you're just trying to color over every little thing, okay? It's just kind of just generally adding this tone into this field. It's kind of, here's what I'm doing, you know, it's kind of like this type of mark, like that. It's just like applying some of that gel here and there. And then we'll build up. Remember, those other lighter colors are to come, so this is just kind of a foundation. This ink, good or bad, it's, I guess it's good that these pens are not quite opaque. Okay, they're more translucent, so you get the colors underneath that are showing through. I do want it to be a little bit more opaque in some of my applications. I wish it were, but a little bit more translucency and, you know, how these are does make it kind of blend into the surrounding a little bit better and easier, because you get those colors underneath that are showing through. Okay, so we have these trees kind of overlapping the other trees on this side. And I want to pull this out from the background a little bit, so I'm adding this gel and this tone right on top of it. Alright, I can get into this area right here a little bit easier by just flipping it upside down. So, don't be afraid to turn your cards around if you're just doing some sort of general application where you don't need to have things registered, you know, upright or down or whatever. Okay? It's kind of like a little coloring book. You're just kind of doing these little scribbles, you know, here and there. See, it's like going like this. Precise or precision, precise marks are not needed, nor would they be very conducive to the overall kind of appearance, I think. So, you know, you want it kind of... What happened to my pen? Alright. No, I thought we had my first block clog or whatever. It's going to fine. I think this is kind of, as I'm applying this, it seemed like it was clogging a little bit, but you see, you can just scribble it a little bit and it gets it flowing again. I think this paper is a little bit wet. I mean, especially where I've added that tone over the top of it. I'm kind of drawing this onto a damp surface right now. It'd probably be better if I waited a little bit for it to dry and set up, but I don't know. It's not too hard to apply. These gel pens are going down just fine. Alright, so we can see some variation already starting to take place within there. Okay. These foreground trees down here at the base. It's really kind of difficult to see where their impressions are for it, you know. So you don't have to be so exact, because it doesn't look exact at all anymore. And you just kind of want to apply some of this and keep it fairly consistent. If you apply it in one area, then probably do it in more areas than one, or do it across, if not the entire kind of composition. Now, if I wasn't making a video, I'm trying to do this a little bit faster. Time-lapse would be faster, you know, if I did that. I need to be able to do play around with some editing software where I can kind of time-lapse through these, but until then, sorry folks, it's in live kind of time here. It's almost like kind of like a meditation in some ways, just kind of going around in here. bring in a little continuity with kind of these mid-ground trees and the foreground trees by adding in. Alright, clog again. Yeah, when this gets really moist on the tip right here, applying it, it's clogging a little bit, so just kind of scribble it around and get it flowing again. These inks are pretty nice. This is a shuttle art gel pens right here. There's probably a lot of other ones that are exactly the same. As I mentioned before, I suspect they're probably all made in the same factory somewhere, just under different branding. It's kind of coming to life. And this is just after one color. We have a lot of other colors to kind of play around with. Bringing a little bit of the green into those background aspens. Alright. Let's move in our value to this lighter one. Every time I use one of these pens, it's probably going to be the first time in these early videos using these gel pens. They get flowing pretty quickly. I'm really pleased to see that. Sometimes you kind of have to scribble it around a little bit. And that one kind of clogged on me quickly. I guess maybe because I started up in this real wet area where I've added those, sky swatches of color, streaks of color. I'm guessing these pens are 0.7 in terms of their ball ball size, 0.7 millimeter. Doing something like this, a 1.0 would be good. Just in terms of the amount. But I don't know, this is coming around pretty good here. Maybe we'll go with some stippling kind of applications here. Yeah, that looks really nice. Yeah, those leaves are kind of round. Aspen leaves. I can cluster some of these little effects. These little marks. Okay, this. You don't have to do it exact, perfect, even application like a pattern across everything. You can just kind of cluster it like that. These little groupings of what it is it's kind of representing kind of like shimmering light on leaves, right? Or they could be backlit and kind of glowing. Alright, now this is where you can kind of start adding in some to your grassy area as well. Okay. And again, just not doing it everywhere. It's kind of just adding a little shimmer to various locations, kind of oscillating the surface a little bit. With having some of this texture and having some, some of it not be texturized is better for variation. Okay. This area in the kind of the middle of these trees is a little bit boring to me, so I'm going to add some highlights to kind of build it out a little bit. So, oops, there I go. Almost working off. I'm kind of scribbling these little circles like this, little dots, you know, to make them bigger in some areas. Okay, so this area in here looks quite different than how it looked just after the impressions, you know, or impressions only, I should say. So, like I said, just variation, adding it here and there. And when you're doing it like this, it's just kind of a texture. It doesn't have to be precise, but whatever you do in a given area, kind of do the same over the whole thing, okay? If I just had this one texture in one area, it would look kind of weird, because there wouldn't be a cohesion, kind of a textural cohesion across the scene. Okay, see these trees down here? Could be foreground or it could be little saplings. Let's bring those out, okay? We really need to bring those out because they really kind of just fade into the surrounding texture. These scenes kind of doing a lot of gel pen work like this. There's a different kind of look that comes about from this process than the kind of my typical gel pen, you know, process with, you know, kind of minimal highlight additions to, you know. So it's kind of interesting watching this happen. I mean, in a scene like this, there's a huge amount of tolerance. You can kind of, you know, I'm practically just doing anything with these pens as long as I'm doing it across all of it. And I mean, I can just go like this, and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter. And it really doesn't. It's just kind of adding that texture when you're adding and again, this is like translucent into over dark, I guess. it would stand out more, you know, I mean, if I was just working in white, you know, the contrast between the white and the background would be much more extreme. And which I'll get to, but I'll kind of use it minimally. Well, I don't know, I shouldn't say that. Maybe I'll use it a lot, but I don't know. The main color of this kind of will be more in the yellows, I think. But there's a lot more dimension kind of working in your, having, you know, kind of a range of translucent colors to work with over a field of that already has some variation in it using the dye-based inks, okay? So I won't be doing this. This is kind of an extreme version, you know, where we're talking about these aspens here. You don't have to use this aspen tree like this, but I wanted to see how far I can kind of push this type of look, and I thought the textural aspect of the, you know, things like aspen trees would be a perfect design to do that with. Okay, that was that pale green. Let's go with this looks kind of looks similar to that brilliant white, I mean a brilliant yellow that I used in the coloring process, or the dye-based ink process. Alright, now this one I'm applying and it doesn't look like it's very opaque at all. It's more transparent, so maybe I won't be doing this. Okay. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'll get some of that color down there, though. All right. Let me use a little bit more of this yellow here. Let's move up into this one. It's kind of a pale orange. Okay, a little bit more opaque than that yellow. Maybe these other ones are pastels, where they're going to have some white in it, where a lot of these gel pens are probably more just the straight color, where, you know, it's not going to stand up over dark very much. I forgot what type. I think there were 3 or 4 types of pens in that set. Glitter, neon, I think it was, basic and metallic. May have been something else too, but I can't remember. Okay. Let me see. Oh, there's one of the other types was rainbow. There's a rainbow type of color. All right, this one's the glitter. I'm gonna go ahead and use glitter. Kind of a it's a very translucent color. It's barely showing up on here, but I'm sure it's kind of leaving a little bit of glitter, which maybe we'll be able to see, maybe not. I think I'll be able to see it here. But I don't think it's going to show up on camera very well, because it'll be something where if I hold it at a certain angle in the light, right, we'll be able to see the glitter showing. I'll see if I can get it to show in the video, though, upon completion. Okay, here's my shuttle art white, okay? It's very translucent, but I think that's what I want right here. I just want to bring out a little bit of highlights here and there, but in a very subtle way, so the color underneath will show through. Oh, okay, maybe I'll start addressing some of these trunks here. Okay. Kind of starts bringing it out from the background a little bit. There are certain parts of the design where I can see a little bit of the, branch in here as well. And even if you can't see it, you can kind of just add it in, and kind of brings the tree to life a little bit more. Gives it a little bit more dimension. Okay, here's this tree right here in the background. I'll kind of follow it up a little bit and add a branch here and there. Can't really see it very well, but like this branch, but where I can't see it very well, it's kind of giving me a little bit of a starting point, and then when I use a little bit more opaque white pen, my Uniball pen, then I'll go in here and I'll kind of reiterate that. But you can see I kind of went in here and just kind of followed that up and added a little bit of a branch here and there. Like here's a branch, or the trunk. So you can kind of have a little peekaboo with the trunk and just, invent it here, even if you can't see it on the in the impressions. So you can kind of see it peeking through some of these areas, and there's a little bit of a branch here and there. I know it's kind of really tough to see, but you can just kind of go in there and kind of add it in yourself, or add one in. It doesn't have to be it, you can just create one. Okay. All right. I'm going to let this set up a little bit and dry. It's it's still a little moist. I want to get more yellow into here, especially kind of after adding some of those branches. I like those branches in there a lot. So I'm going to let this set up a little bit and come back to it and continue working on it then. Okay, I'm back. This paper and these trees are kind of set up now in terms of the drawing, but I've given this a day, and I was looking at it, and it occurred to me I want to try something. I want to try to layer something else right over the top of this in terms of some texture. And what I'm thinking about is employing some of this yellow pigment ink. I happen to have some of it. I don't think I've ever used it. This pad is really old, but if I've ever used this, I don't remember. I'm usually using white pigment ink, but I wanted to see if I can get some extra texture into this tree area. I don't know if it's going to show up too much, but I think I can get some, just some additional, I don't know, subtle texture using some of this pigment ink on there. And I'm going to use the same image again to get that texture. I mean, this is really textured now with all this different gel pen ink on there, but let's play around with this a little bit and see what we get, okay? I hope this pad isn't dry. This pad's open, but I just don't recall ever using it for anything. Maybe one or two things, but not much. Okay, I'm just going to use, I don't know, we'll see. I'm putting this on as opposed to inking it up like that because I don't want the whole thing. I don't think. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm going to try to build up a pretty decent amount in one area here. Okay, that's what we have. And I'll just go for it somewhere. I'll put my finger over it so I kind of know where I'm making the impression. Let's go right about here. I'm curious to see if it makes it a little bit more dimensional. It looks like just a smear. It looks like I almost could have just taken this and just dabbed it on, but there is a little bit of glow there. There is definitely not this sense of an impression made on it. I think it looks pretty good, though. It kind of lightens it up and warms it up because of the color that it is. So let's go for it in a couple more areas here. I'll use more of the side of it in terms of the shape of the silhouette of the tree. These branches here. I want it more dimensional. I want this tree to be coming forward, not some, I mean, we're doing two-dimensional imagery here, but we want to make it as three-dimensional as possible. So we'll see. I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting to do some embossing on here, to build some of those tones out. Okay. It's more like a stain that's being applied. It's kind of interesting, though. We'll see where it gets to. If it goes anywhere. Beyond kind of a colored smear. Now remember, this is not opaque, so it's translucent, meaning the things are showing through it. It's just a matter of how translucent. The more translucent, the less, really effect this is going to have, which isn't a bad thing. We might want it more subtle. Think of where I want it to go. Let's go about right here. Okay. Okay, let's go down here. I guess I'm probably going to add this over a lot of it. One of the things about kind of these trees and this type of feeling that I'm going after, how I get there, I don't know, but the feeling I want to go after is when these leaves and trees are backlit, there's this almost kind of a stained glass type of feel that I get, all these little colored lights that are real shimmery. And I want some more of that. Everything was a little bit too dark here for me. But I'm adding this in the hopes of kind of getting more of that. And it's coming around here a little bit. These ones have it. But now these ones are more key because they're kind of in the foreground, or, well, they are in the foreground. And I want more of that going on. I want more of this kind of glow type of look. We'll see if I can get to it. One of the things that occurred to me, I really want a little bit more of an opaque yellow gel pen. I'll see if I can kind of achieve that with these ones, which are really great, but I might want more of a kind of a real solid mark and opaque mark when I'm adding my tones. Alright, it's warming up a little bit. Excuse me. Okay, let's get this tree over here. It's always kind of interesting playing around with different looks, different techniques. You really don't know what you're going to get. And kind of the result that you get the first time isn't necessarily kind of the ideal incarnation of some technique, because techniques, the more they're resolved, the potentially better they are. So the fact that I'm just doing this right now, and I have to kind of keep in mind, well, if I don't get what I want, then can I, using different media, different touch, different pressure somewhere, so, you know what I mean, something like that. So, alright, I'm adding all this gel pen, pigment ink on here. I'm hoping I can kind of build up a little, well, let me just go direct to pad here. Something like that. Okay. And I'll address some of this tree right here. I don't need to go for it right over the top, you know, perfectly. I want just the leaves to kind of come out towards us a little bit more. Okay. It's glowing a little bit more. It's red. There's a kind of a diffusion that I'm seeing here. Okay, and we'll hit this one kind of here. I'm kind of doing it off registration a little bit. I'm not trying to go directly over it because I want to set it kind of off a little bit so that it looks more dimensional than just hitting, you know, the tree exactly in the same spot that I did the first time. Okay, so it looks a little bit more like that. So I'm getting this backlit glow a little bit more. And again, it almost looks like I just kind of sponged the thing right over it. Nah, it is a little bit more textural, I guess, by using the stamp to make impressions of it. It might be interesting even to go with white, because if I stamp white over it, then maybe the colors underneath will show through, so it'll just look like a lighter shade of yellow. I'm not really quite sure. Let me see. Alright, this one is a little really juicy. I'm going to try this here. I'm not going for white leaves or something like that, but alright, that's really quite juicy. This is a re-inked color box pad that I kind of re-inked this and it kind of broke down the foam a little bit. It's not so springy, it's kind of mushy looking. Alright, let me just kind of spread this out a little bit. I don't want that big blob like that, so I'll take off some of that ink, or maybe a good deal of it. Do something like that. Take off a little bit more off the top. Alright. Semi-interesting. Semi-not. Alright, let's see if I can get some additional tone on here. Okay. It's a little bit more dimensional. Alright, let's do this. Build it up a little bit more again. So maybe it's an oscillation of a little bit of yellow white, then yellowish white again. Just using the same tip here, putting some yellow into it. Okay. If you do it in one area, you should do it in more areas than that, just for a little bit of continuity in terms of a technique. Okay, go here and here. Okay, it kind of looks, at this stage of that application, it really looks weird. But I know I can go over it with the more gel pens. So, as I always say, it's kind of not so much of A to Z, technique with, scenic stamping. but it's far more of a kind of a circular process, you know, where you can do a certain application of some media, and then you might go away from it and do some other things, but then you kind of go circle around and you add some more of that back into it. So it's like you're building thing over thing over thing, and technique and media over one another. Okay. Looks okay, I think. As far as I think what I'm going after. I hope it's kind of leading me to that, you know, destination, textural destination that I kind of desire. Alright, that's what we have so far. It's really building up some textures in here and dimension. We'll see if it's kind of helping in a good way, or if it's kind of distracting, I don't know. Okay, I've added it on those trees back there as well. So it's certainly a little bit more dimensional. Alright. Now, I have a feeling that I'm going to have to wait for this to dry again in order to start going into this this pigmenting here with some other gel pen textures. Okay, let me see here. Kind of bringing that out a little bit more. Okay, now I have a feeling too that when this dries, it's probably going to be like any other pigment. It kind of dries a little bit more transparent. You know, it moves away from opacity to slightly less so. Kind of the more that it dries, so we'll see. Alright, let me see something here, just out of curiosity, before it dries. If I can add on to it, it looks like I can, so maybe I don't need it to dry as much. I'm sure I'll need to dry it a little bit, though. Adding this yellow back into it. Kind of yellow little dots here and there to represent those leaves. This is the one that was a little bit more kind of transparent. After I had a few dots down, I'm kind of scribbling it off, as I mentioned before, because I kind of roll some of that wet pigment ink, I think, up into my pen here, so I'm going to have to go into it a little bit. You know, when I'm doing this type of technique here, I almost feel like, after a while, I feel like it's almost like working on canvas or something like that, because it's kind of this painterly approach, and the surface here, for one, is matte, so I don't know, it doesn't feel like paper anymore because of all the buildup of color and ink on top of it. It's kind of a nice feel. All right. Let me go on with my Uniball Signo, the Japan-made one. Let's go for a little bit more opaque marks. Okay, let's go into those tree trunks and really bring them out, okay, with kind of more true white. I'm kind of just defining some branches here and there. I'm not kind of sticking to the ones on the only on the image. First of all, I can't even see them because I have so much ink and gel pen on there at this point in time, so I'm just kind of drawing them in where they might not exist already. Okay. Well, it's definitely multi-tonal, to say the least. Okay, let's see. It's some highlights here and there. Definitely textured. That is for sure. I think I've mentioned in other videos, if I'm not really talking very much, I'm kind of getting into whatever I'm doing, but it's also largely because I have no idea, or I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's more the case right now. I'm just kind of doing this, and I'm not really quite sure of what to expect. Okay. The idea, though, is I'm kind of working from darks and working progressively lighter, trying to build the forms out to make them seem more dimensional and textured, all the while trying to, I don't know, kind of retain continuity or to define a continuity between the different areas. And when you're kind of doing something, you're mixing a bunch of kind of unexplored techniques, and there are very, like, even themes within a given piece. It's you really don't know what to expect, and sometimes it kind of sometimes you kind of figure out what to do as you're doing it. You know, something will kind of reveal itself as whatever a good technique or a good mark to do. The opposite is true too. You kind of find out what maybe doesn't work. And there's a lot of times when when I'm doing this and something, and early on it's, you're really not really quite certain if something is working or not, but more often than not, it's kind of like where you're doing something, and if you keep working it, it kind of comes around a little bit, even if it doesn't look like it's going to early on. I think this scene looks interesting. It's kind of getting there in terms of what I'm hoping it will kind of resemble in the end. One of the things that I'm thinking about too is I've added this light impressions over the tops of the darker ones, okay? But in kind of some of those dark areas, it wouldn't be bad to kind of, do darker impressions, to create some additional shadow. Or maybe, I've kind of been building everything up with lighter tones. Maybe I put in some darker tones and with the gel pen marks, to create things like shadows or the complements to these lighter touches. Kind of the more branches I find I'm adding to these trunks, the better it looks. Okay. Some highlights in the grassy area. Really brings those areas to life. Okay, this is leafless limbs, small. And let's go for some additional texture in here. Scratch that. I'm not going to do it with the Marvy black. Let's do it with the VersaFine again. Okay. Or, yeah. Okay, VersaFine mark. Masking material, red paper towel. Okay. We need additional textures in the scene. Okay. See that when I ripped it this way, it was kind of real straight because these paper towels have a little bit of grain to it. And I wanted something a little bit more regular, so I ripped it cross grain. Okay, something like this, maybe. So sometimes you see dead trees, right? Okay, see it in here? I think I want some other textures in here as well. Let's go with the... I was thinking about adding another impression of that, but let's go with the winter brush. Okay, a little bit of foreground imagery. Look how crisp that is against this background here. But it should, you know, kind of blend in with the background as well. But it certainly needed something kind of definitive and crisp with all this kind of you know, shimmery, highly textured tones in the background. I mean, this is textured too, but kind of in a different way. Okay, now what I was mentioning earlier was I thought that some of this could use a little bit of a application of sorry, I'm kind of my thoughts. I'm looking for a kind of a darker green pen here. I was thinking I can add some darker applications in some of these areas just to complement those lighter touches. Okay, well, this one's, I'm not sure what color this is. It looks a little bit olivey, but it looks like it's a metallic. It is dark though, so why not? I'll just add some more of these some little darker marks here and there to represent kind of some shadows maybe within these trees. Maybe I can add a little bit of a shadow at the kind of on the undersides of some of these tree limbs that I drew in, just to give them a little bit more dimension. Okay, kind of defining certain things in here a little bit more. Feels more and more, as I just said earlier, it's feeling more and more like a painting or something like that. I'm kind of bending this back, you know, this is only a 10-point thickness, It'd been nice to have 12 points, so these days I'm kind of recommending people, if they buy a ream of paper, just to go for the 12 point. It's a few bucks more per 200 sheets, you know, so when you divide that up over 200 sheets and probably using a quarter size each, so 800, you know, pieces of paper, if you're working on this size here, like $2 or $3 more. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's even $5 more, but $5 more over 800 pieces of you know, your working surface. Here, that's not too much, and then you won't have to bend things back like I do on my 10-point thickness paper. Okay. That's a lot of pigment ink and gel ink on this scene. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to go in with my white gel, white pigment ink, and I like to add in a bit of a kind of a misty, foggy looking touch here and there. And this scene is certainly attempting to be about kind of light and backlit illumination. So I think that some mist on the ground would go very well in such a kind of a, you know, a theme and scheme. Alright, now I'm working in a very dry brushed application where a couple taps and, you know, aren't really doing anything at all. But it's through repetitive applications of that very dry ink I'm building up a little bit of pigment ink in that given area, okay? That way I don't get these blobs of paint on my scene. Being careful around that versifying impression, just in case it was a little bit moist. On the matte side of my cardstock, it seems to be dry, so it dries fairly quick on this matte paper. On the matte paper, you have a little bit of a absorbency, so the drying is much faster than on glossy, a more sealed glossy cardstock. Okay. All right. We have a lot of applications here. I'm going to let this sit and see what it looks like after a little bit of time, and see if I can see something else with some fresh eyes on what else I want to do to it. But it's kind of taking it to scene to the extremes of what I'm going after, but I don't know, it's fun, and it's really turning out. It's certainly a exercise in texture, that's for sure. More than anything I've done in the past, maybe, I don't know. But it could be. When finished, I think I could use some other tones in here. Maybe some little effects, like some flowers or something like that. I'm not sure, but maybe a little bit of extra color in here. Subtle color, maybe. But I think that would look really good. But the significant parts, well, I've done a lot to it in this past, but that white gel pen in there, but contrasting those really stark whites in there against those darker elements in here, really kind of pushing it a little bit more. I think I can use a little bit more texture in here as well, maybe. But anyways, we'll see. Let me give us a little bit of a break. Okay, one thing about kind of experimenting with various processes and techniques, or maybe not a technique, but just marks, I guess we can kind of classify them as, is that, like this video right here, it would be great if it was, but it's not really instructional, but it's just an experiment. And one of the things from kind of experimentation is sometimes kind of a technique or process will reveal itself, or several along the way. So for something like this, I'm looking at the trees now, and I like the variation and depth. They're starting to kind of reflect. But one of the things that occurs to me is that I'd like a little bit more definition in them, okay? There's a lot of rich surface pattern in them, but I think we need a little bit more kind of definitive marks. Okay, I'm going to check this color right here, and I'm thinking that I want to use maybe some of the underside imagery, the undersides of some of these branches right here, okay? And which ones I use, I'm not really quite sure, but let me just color some up right now. And again, I mean, I have no idea what this is going to look like. I think I colored up too much. Let me see. Let me go back in and wipe some of these up. I guess I can test. Maybe I'll test some of this first. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm kind of dabbing some of it off, thinking that it'll be darker and then it'll be lighter on the top side of it. So I can kind of get some of that underside, maybe where it might represent some of the shadows, okay? And I want it roughly within the tree somewhere. Okay, like down there, that looks okay, and I get a little bit of it up there as well. You see that right in here? And I'll do the same thing over here. I want some of this tree. This tree right here kind of merges in with this tree. There's two different ones right here, and I want to pull this one out kind of closer to us from a visual standpoint, okay? If I can. I don't know if I can, but that's kind of the goal. So if I'm going to use some of these, what do you call it, bows or branches? We'll do something like that. Okay. And then let's soften up some of them a little bit so that they transition from dark to light in as graceful a manner as I can get. I'm not sure if it will be graceful, but let's see. Just eyeballing it, it doesn't really matter if it's really close or whatnot. Wherever it goes, it just goes. Okay. Okay, see that right there? That kind of pulls it out a little bit right here. Pulls this front one up a little bit, right? Pushes the other one back. And I think it wouldn't be bad to do it in here too. Okay. That looks pretty good. And again, I always like the idea that in scenic stamping, you know, we can take these textures. This is kind of taking it to the extreme, but we can take, you know, bits and pieces off existing designs and use them for other purposes, you know, rather than, or other than, or in addition to, maybe, in addition to your full impression, you know, things that we've come to know rubber stamps for, you know, we're stamping a design. But in scenic stamping, you know, we're really talking about, you know, the ability to stamp partial designs as well, okay? Okay, this is going pretty well, I would say. It's just kind of adding to the depth within a two-dimensional object, which in turn will hopefully kind of lend itself to this feeling of a three-dimensional, you know, giving the illusion of three dimensions. Okay, I'm hitting this foreground one. Right here. Okay. Looks a little bit muddy, I think. And that we'll try to define a little bit more with some gel pen. Okay. Okay. Barely see it right here. Not quite, but or not exactly, but it's kind of a impressionism. I don't know, it's on the verge. I don't know, it's not really on the verge of it, but we're talking about kind of light, you know, shimmering light, interpretive, you know, interpretations of light within a given, you know, object or area. This right here is really wet. Oh, I know, it's not wet. It's full of that pigment ink built up there. I might have to do a spray fix. A spray fixative, or a workable spray fixative, is something you spray over your existing piece, like say if you're doing something with pastels or chalks, but it leaves a little bit of a texture, which allows you to add on top of it, so it seals and creates another surface for you to work on. And I think I need to do that on this one. We're starting to get into the, looks like I got some of that little overstamping there, but oh well. We're starting to get into this, this build-up on this that's almost kind of like pastels or something like that. Maybe I ought to try some of that on here. I'll see if I have a workable... yeah. Yeah. I'll show you what I'm thinking about doing here. This is a workable spray fix, Blair spray fix, I don't know, but it's a workable matte fixative, okay? So I'm going to spray it over this. It might change the surface a little bit, but so be it. And then I'll try to apply additional tone over the top of it. So I'll need to shake this up and give it a shot here. Okay, after a spraying, wow. What a change from a subtle type of aspect. There was a lot of depth that was missing in here, but I've lost a lot of the kind of the opacity, and a lot of this is translucent now, or transparent. The more I sprayed that pigment ink, the more transparent it gets, which happens at times now. This page is a little bit wet right after spraying, so I'm going to have to let this set up and dry. It's dry to the touch, but it's a little bit, you know, damp. I'm not talking about it's soaked, you know. I could have let it dry outside, but I don't want this surface to fade at all, because this is really about subtleties. But let's let this dry and see what happens as far as it being able to be worked with additional tones and textures, and hopefully I can kind of get a little bit more kind of crisp, definitive marks with my pens, because the surface was just so caked with pigment ink and gel pen marks. Kind of that got really built up, so this could be one of those things. And sometimes in some types of paintings, what they do is they add a few marks down and they spray it and seal it, then they add some more, spray, you know, and then work it. So I don't know, it might be that might be the process that's conducive to what we're kind of going after. But I'm seeing a lot more depth in these trees than I've kind of achieved in the past with my typical process of dye-based inks and a few little highlights on them. But I don't know, just going for dimension here and depth within the objects now. I don't know. I'm kind of going back and forth a lot on these, where I'm kind of adding something down and it kind of builds up some depth, and I might do something over the top of it which might eradicate kind of some of that process right here. But I think it's kind of going in a direction that I want it to go in. And I don't know, there's a decent amount of depth in here. I lost some of that kind of that foggy texture down there, but that can be applied again, I believe, but we'll see. Alright, so I'll let this set up a little bit more and see what happens. Okay, let's see what this workable matte fixative did or didn't do. Okay, drawing into that pigment ink application, I'm finding that I'm still kind of drawing onto a little bit of a thicker surface, but these marks are applying, unlike before where I'm kind of digging into kind of wet, somewhat wet paint, which is, again, which pigment ink is kind of akin to. When I talk about pigment inks, I don't know, I think they're more kind of, I guess they wouldn't be paint, because maybe they would dry in those pads, but I don't know. Okay, kind of scumbling, if that could be done on this paper, kind of little, making my little marks here with the yellow gel pen. I wish it was a little bit more opaque, and I think I could achieve that with the, if I had a uniball yellow, but I don't have one. I looked online to see if there was a 1.0, and the 0.7 was the largest one. Let me see if I could see a size for some of these. So this is, well, this is a 0.7. This is pink. I'm not going to use that. That's okay. I wish it was a 1.0. I think these are 1.0 right here. Can't read Japanese. And it doesn't really say, but I believe that to be a thicker tip there. But a little bit more opacity would give me a little bit more punch and kind of a, not depth, but I don't know, presence, I guess, on here. I'm going to have to see if I can find a 1.0. I believe I've seen them, but not sure. You know, specific colors aren't going to be nearly as popular as like a white or maybe a black, you know. Actually, this is working out not too bad. The workable fixative works pretty well, I would say. Okay. Let me add some white ones. Perhaps the white ones don't represent white leaves, but they represent kind of a little bit of shimmer. You know, where the light is really reflecting off of them. Okay, that's kind of bringing it out a little bit. Really trying to push, I've never tried to push dimension so far as this experimental piece. Really trying to push it and create a lot of texture and variation within a given image. I've tried to push dimension depth in the overall scene, but I haven't really focused quite so much in imagery, okay? Like just one object, or well, in this case it's the trees, so, but kind of your impressionistic stamping. It's far from impressionism, but I don't know, if I zoomed in here and you know, we showed one little area, hopefully it would kind of, you know, work as somewhat of an abstract, interesting abstract. Kind of reiterating these, the lighting on the tree, because when I sprayed it, if you know, if you've done kind of sprays on chalks or pastels, you know that they kind of dull out a little bit. So this is So after you spray it, just come back in and redefine your marks. Okay. I'll put a little bit of variation in this tree in the background. The dead one. Okay. I'm kind of just inventing some of these trunks, branches, and trunks in some areas. Because I like that kind of that white, kind of stalk look. I'm just kind of creating somewhere. They really don't exist, but who cares, you know? Alright. Kind of putting some little cross contour into the trunk. Highlights back into the meadow where they disappeared with the workable fixative, or were subdued with the workable fixative. Alright, that's a nice kind of foundation, I would say. The workable fixative worked wonders, I guess. Okay, now I have this little area in here, and I'm wondering if I want something in there. It would be a nice spot for something, or I can put some birds in the sky, perhaps. Decisions. Oh, one of the things I was going to do was, alright, let's say this is kind of at high elevation. I was going to add some extra little touches, just a little bit of change of hue. Alright. This is my Sharpie paint pen. There. Had to get that ball loose. There's this ball in here. Okay, and that's the thing that mixes up your paint. I could do some of the, I would use a gel pen if I didn't have this. But let's say there's some lupin growing in this meadow. Okay. And these paint pens are pretty opaque. Okay, and I'm going for some opacity here, so. But I'm sure those gel pens, they would do adequately, but maybe not as good as this one, so let's try to add some little lupin in here. I can barely see it, actually. It's a little bit of purple amongst yellows and greens. I might be going back into a little bit of spring here, but I don't know, let's just call it late summer and the at high altitude, sometimes at high altitude you see kind of little flowers. You know, they come about much later than the lower elevations, especially like sea level. Speaking of wildflowers, you know, you hate to see kind of these gigantic wildflower fires burning all over California this year, but and you certainly don't want any kind of, you know, loss of homes and stuff. It's a tragic thing, but in nature, especially around in our chaparral kind of type of terrain, a lot of this brush is kind of designed, you know, by nature to burn occasionally. But in these areas where it's burning, or has burnt, those are the areas that are just going to be absolutely covered with wildflowers. Come the spring, if we have, you know, if we get any, you know, decent amount of rain at all, but it can be absolutely spectacular in terms of the wildflower show. Alright, this is black. I've lost some of my really crisp impressions down here. See how kind of that foreground twigs got a little bit muddy, and I'm going to just go in and just reclaim some of this. I think I'm going to go in and add a few little like shadows on the bottom sides of some of these tree trunks and branches that I did in white. Might be kind of interesting, I don't know. Might be too dark actually, but it's just kind of giving a little element of kind of sharpness amongst kind of softer, overall softer types of marks. It looks okay. Like I said, maybe something a little bit maybe not as quite as dark. That's a good color right there that I just pulled. It's like an olive, but it's a glitter pen, glitter olive. Let me just go with black then. I'm not keeping if there's a tree trunk or something, I'm not going with it completely. Just outlining some whole thing. I'm just kind of doing more of these little types of marks like this, you know, on here. It gives it a little bit more dimension, I would think, or it seems. Okay. It looks okay, but anytime you do something like that, anytime you kind of go for a little bit more of an extreme mark, color, whatever, texture, anything like that, sometimes it serves you well to go back in and just to kind of, okay, this is not drawing on that. That gel really kind of sticks on there, so let me go with something a little bit thicker. Okay, to go in and break up those marks a little bit. Okay. Just so that it doesn't stick out quite so much, you know, those lines. Alright. I think that should kind of wrap it up a little bit. I'd say these trees have a pretty decent amount of dimension at this point in time. There's a lot of depth and lighting and shimmer in them. It has a decent, kind of fun and playful surface. At this point in time in the scene, you know, someone was in a rubber stamper, knew these images. I don't know if it's been so heavily coated with pigment ink and gel pen marks. I don't even know if it's recognizable as a rubber stamp scene, but it certainly is as a foundation. And a lot of dots later, or marks in general. I think it looks like a pretty decent scene. It sure does kind of potentially serve as a really fantastic stage for another image if I wanted to add one in there, like a little subject matter, but I think I'll just leave it at that. Like an animal or something would be kind of nice in here. I love these white branches coming out in here. Kind of makes it for me. Probably wouldn't look like that out in nature, but who cares? If it looks good, all's good. Okay, what an experiment, and what a journey this one has taken me on. I learned some things about it, about the technique and whatnot. I think working with this, I wouldn't do so much. I think I'd be able to achieve something similar with less work. And perhaps I would start that off in the impressions. I think I would go for some of the impressions. I think I would get multiple tones. I think I would stamp it out in maybe a medium tone color. And then I think I would go back into it with some of these darker tones, like when I was doing some of the undersides, some of these branches, and I would stamp them in there just to begin with. And then maybe what I would do is I need to get like a real opaque, like a brilliance pigment ink pad or something like that would dry quickly, and I would stamp those out. So I think I would get the impressions established much earlier than stamping something out and then doing gel pen work, stamping it out again, gel pen work, stamping out the shadows, gel pen work, or something like that. I think I would be able to achieve a lot of the same types of looks, but maybe quicker, just in doing my impressions first, because sometimes after I'm stamping gel pen work and doing, some pen work back into it, or the gel pen into pigment ink, it just wasn't applying. That's where the spray fixative came in. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and always the thing that I kind of mention is it's always kind of nice when you see something kind of develop that you haven't seen before, even if it's an image that you're very familiar with. So it kind of reintroduces you to them, and I don't know, it kind of redefines the potential use of the imagery, and kind of opens up some doors too to new ways of using not only that image but other images. I'll have to try this type of thing in some pine trees. Pine trees, you don't typically see a whole lot of depth in those. The range of hue in them probably, and values probably aren't quite as extreme as like a deciduous tree, but I think there is something that we can do with just about all trees to make them seem a little bit more complex as far as that goes. I've always thought trees were the hardest thing to render, and it takes me a long time, because it's just like drawing a person. You have to get the gesture down where it's nice, and there's a lot of gesture in them and character where they don't look stiff and clunky. And I always felt that if you can get the trees down right, the rest of the scene is fairly easy because it's a static type of image. But you want to have something, in rubber stamps we have these solid forms right here, but in reality, trees, unless it's some dead tree or something like that, the pieces they move in the wind or with the slightest breeze. You have something, so you have to kind of have them delicate. So sometimes you try to get as much as you can down in the imagery, but then when you get around to the stamping, you want to have as many different possibilities for the user to implement that image into any given scene, for what they're going after. So very flat, I can stamp this out as a silhouette in black, but here's that same stamp right next to it, kind of full of variation and lighting and value. To me, it looks like a different image in many ways. Or it doesn't even look stamped altogether at this point in time, perhaps. So, thank you so much for watching, and if you have watched through this whole thing, you deserve a medal. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. more things to come, more experiments to happen, and new things to learn.